Yeah. All right. Welcome everyone to Autism Training and Technical Assistance webinar. Today we'll be doing listening that leads to opportunity with Darlene and Kayla. Um, Next slide. I'm Dalton Byers, Educational Outreach and Research Specialist with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Supports. If you have any technical questions or need any support during the webinar, feel free to mention me in the comments or the questions, and I will be there to support you. The Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project exists to develop and present resources that assist individuals with autism in their transition from secondary education to either post-secondary education or employment. Today, we're going to talk a lot about that employment piece. ICSPS exists to support the success of every learner through the comprehensive application of research-based practices, encouraging professionals to educate equitably and offering expertise in creating excellent learning environments through professional development events like this event today. We thank ISB for funding and supporting the ATTA project. I'm going to drop a couple polls in the chat right now to for everyone in attendance. Please kind of refer to this map to give us an idea of where you're at in Illinois, or if you're statewide. Statewide is an option for who's here. Give us an idea, and then also when we ask about stakeholder, we're asking about kind of which of these six stakeholders best represents you, whether you're in secondary educator or individual, post-secondary, if you're a student or young adult, community member, family, or an employer. And I'll go back to the map. Some of them kind of can be a little unclear. Okay, give everyone just a couple seconds here. Alrighty. Got a lot of people from Chicago and statewide, which we appreciate, and very high concentration in secondary and post-secondary educators. So we'll keep that in mind as we're kind of talking about this topic today. So I'll end the poll, kind of share the results. So excited, and I'm gonna stop sharing. Oh, reminder, this is Darlene, Director of Madison County Employment and Training, and Kayla, Work-Based Learning Coordinator. I'm going to stop sharing my screen once I find that button. While Kayla works on sharing her screen, I'm going to let you all know that you're welcome to chime in the chat with any questions you may have. If you'd like to offer those questions verbally, feel free to raise your hand and I can give you that permission to share out verbally if it's a little easier to talk that way. Feel free to mention that at any point and we can take questions as they're relevant. Okay, it looks like we've got that display setting. So at the very top left where the display settings are, Kayla,
Yes.
if you select that,
Yep. Okay.
and then it's like a swap presenter view and slideshow.
Okay. Did that work?
Not yet. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Huh. Oh, I hate when this happens. This is the one thing that I said that we practiced and then
Uh-huh.
we did it and then it worked and then now it's not.
You want me to stop share and then try again?
Sure.
Okay.
Or just, yeah. Or you can just end slideshow and try again. I don't know why it's being goofy. We even practiced. We had an audience while we were practicing.
I know it was good. Okay, I'm
It
gonna
was
try
so
again.
good. All right. I believe. Okay. I think we did the top left one. I don't think it should matter, but I'm very superstitious when it comes to technology. And also thank everyone for your patience while we figure it out. There we go.
All
Okay.
right.
All right, I'm gonna go mute and turn my video off for everyone to pay attention to you, but I am available if anyone needs me.
All right, thank you. All right. Okay, well, thank you for participating with us today for Listening That Leads to Opportunity. I'm Darlene Ladd. I'm actually the director here at Madison County Employment and Training. A little background information on me is I've been here at Madison County for 10 years. Prior to that, I was with a private nonprofit that worked with contracting through Division of Rehabilitation Services to provide job placement, supported employment, work assessments, and as well was a AbilityOne contractor in 3 states. I worked directly with the AbilityOne contractors as well. Kayla?
And I'm Kayla Bosing. I've been with Madison County Employment and Training for about 5.5 years. Before this, I was mostly in the mental health field. For several years, I worked mental health, recovery care, substance use. A big portion of that, I did the IPS program, which was individual placement and support. So essentially a job program that was geared directly toward those with mental illness. We did a lot of community partnering and job matching for person to business. And then I came here and I've been here since. All right. All right. So who is Madison County Employment and Training? We are a government agency that administers the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. We just say WIOA. Our services to the community include resume development, job searching activities. We have a resource room where people can come in and build a resume, job search, use our job search board, get whatever assistance they're needing. We do cover tuition assistance. We have youth services, which is like paid work experience, tuition assistance. We have in-school and out-of-school programs for youth. And then we also cover business services. So that could look like job postings for a business. We can do on-the-job training with individuals, and we can do incumbent worker training for the business to do some upskilling for their current staff.
Okay. We're actually going to go back in time a little bit. We're gonna start with talking about a program that we created and how it's evolved and what we learned and what we've taken to our business contacts and have continued to do. So let me tell you about how this all began. Life was coming back together after COVID. So, you know, people had been in their homes, not in the school buildings, not in the offices. And Collinsville High School was looking for additional opportunities for the students who were in the STEP programs and in the special education programs. The city of Collinsville was looking for qualified employees due to the labor shortage. They were not able to recruit individuals to come in and work in the city environment after COVID. Okay. So we met with the city of Collinsville and with Collinsville High School and started to develop an apprenticeship. The apprenticeship began with the Gateway Convention Center and the Parks and Recreation Department. The positions we identified with the greatest need for the city were convention center housekeeping, event setup and removal, and groundskeeping. Okay, so we had 6 apprentices in our original startup. These essentially were 6 students. They were chosen because they did not have jobs. And part of STEP is a vocationally based program, so we wanted those students to have jobs so that they were meeting their requirements and getting that vocational experience. So the city of Collinsville, the department heads went to the classrooms and kind of gave a high level overview of the jobs to the students that were available within setup, housekeeping, and groundskeeping and landscaping. Then the STEP coordinator, the teacher, she helped them decide between event setup, groundskeeping, and landscaping. We had 2 positions in each department, so we had 2 students per occupation. So once the students had been on the job for a little while, myself and our previous director, we were in the area and we decided to stop by the convention center to find out how things were going. What we found out was it was not going well. And the reasons were we were seeing a lack of progression in learning. The students weren't learning. Staff were very frustrated. They felt overwhelmed. We were having some disruptive behaviors. We had a refusal to work, someone who just sat in a chair and said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not interested. We had horseplay. We had apprentices who were just kind of vanishing with their phones. So they would come up missing and staff would be spending time looking for them because they couldn't find them. And the convention center is a fairly large building. Frontline staff, students, parents, and teachers really didn't understand what we were doing. We were actually building an apprenticeship. Everyone else was thinking we had a co-op job. This was just going to be for a few months and it was going to be over. In reality, this was a year-long program. The apprenticeship we were doing was 1 calendar year in duration. So what happened at that moment when we found out things were going south pretty quickly, we decided to do a roundtable meeting, and it was definitely reactionary, not proactive. So it's never a good way to start out, was being reactionary. So we had a roundtable meeting. We invited the staff, the teachers, Regional Office of Education, who was involved as well with this program, our employment and training staff, to address the problems. We didn't know what the problems were until we got everyone in a room. When we sat in the meeting, we said, this is just for the fact so that we can help the students and help the staff. So we need everyone to be really honest with what you're seeing, what are you hearing, and what can we do? So it was very interesting. Staff really brought the problems forward, which we were grateful for, so that we could then start working on it. We also then, because of WIOA, we provide the students a career specialist. So they have a case manager as well. So what we learned from the students' side is that the students didn't like their jobs. The students didn't want to be on the job site. Frontline staff were not sure what rules or policies the students were supposed to follow because they knew they were in a special program. They weren't thinking of them as just being hired as employees out of the gate. And they were still in the mindset of it being a co-op program. So they were thinking, well, in a couple of months, they'll move on. And so frontline staff were still overworked because now they're trying to figure out how to work around our students and do their work, how to support them, but they didn't have the support they needed from us to be successful. Okay. So with that, what we did was we did individual student meetings to start working with the students, to finding out more information about the positions, their satisfaction, how they felt about the job. We also started implementing a student employment handbook. We had a meeting with the students, parents, and the staff. We went over the handbook. Everyone was in one room, so everyone knew what the expectation of employment was. If you had a uniform, you were supposed to wear it, what it meant if you didn't. We also implemented a cell phone policy for students because the adults who worked at the convention center, the cell phone was not a problem. They knew when to use their phone and couldn't use their phone. Well, we were dealing with students who had been at school all day. Now they were in an environment where they could move more freely, and the phone was a much bigger problem for them. So we became much more involved. The ROE was sending in a case manager, and we were sending in a case manager. So students could really understand what employment meant, because these were, again, students who this is their first experience with employment. So, we expected them to have a fund of knowledge that they didn't have. So we realized we had to step back and teach work. Okay. So what we learned 4 students really didn't like the job. It was dirty, it was boring, a student didn't want to be there at all, just not happy with what they were given to do. We had two who did like the job. One was fired due to horseplay. And unfortunately, it was a safety incident that we just couldn't, we couldn't get around. So unfortunately, they did lose their job due to horseplay. And one student actually completed the apprenticeship and stayed in the position. And our first completer was Keyshawn Thomas. He was our first high school completer. Keyshawn has a lot of pride in his work, likes his job and coworkers. He, met the goals for the Department of Labor completion, and he was always hired as a permanent city employee, but he continued on as a city employee. This was his actual DOL certificate awardment ceremony. This ceremony was done during the city council for Collinsville. And so we have a lot of dignitaries in that room. We have the local workforce investment board chair. We had at the time the apprenticeship committee for the state of Illinois. The representative was there. We had the city of Collinsville. We had the regional office of education superintendent. We had DCEO representation, Division of Rehabilitation representation, and the Department of Labor. Bruce Hollum came and helped us award the certificate.
The definition of listen. So Merriam-Webster has 3 definitions: to pay attention to sound, to hear something with thoughtful attention, give consideration, to be alert to catch an unexpected sound. So obviously in everything that we're talking about, the biggest thing that we learned overall was to listen. And I would say that number 2 is what applies mostly to us: to hear something with thoughtful attention, give consideration. This is really what led us and kind of taught us on how to move forward. So learning to listen. The second cohort for the city of Collinsville, we started asking questions. We started doing some pre-interviewing. So the whole idea was, like Darlene said, you can't just have, six bodies and put them in 6 positions. They're going to have to actually be engaged and like what they're doing. So we, started asking, have you had a job in the past? What do you like to do? What do you want to do after high school? What do you dislike, or what kind of job will you not do? And let's maybe talk about why. Trying to kind of help navigate even the things that maybe somebody likes or dislikes, and kind of talk about reasons behind that. So improvements. So going back to the whole idea of listening, obviously what came out of that is improvements. So there started being honest roundtable meetings. So as this, we kind of moved forward, it was, what can we implement to kind of help navigate, between our staff, the employer staff, and also, the school staff. Like what's going to help if we bring everybody to the table and discuss what's going on, and how we can kind of make everybody's situation work better. Regular discussions on what's working, what is not, what could be better. Frontline staff enhancement, job coaching for success and communication. So this is something that we can offer to any employer. Essentially, it is a training that kind of goes through like a de-escalation process. We've had some employers immediately say, yes, absolutely. And we've had some that haven't wanted it and maybe figured out later that they do, and some that just didn't at all. But it is something that we always offer up front, especially when you're working with students who haven't had a job or maybe have a learning disability of some kind. It kind of helps, them to kind of learn how to communicate best with that person and how to de-escalate a situation. There was, like Darlene said, the development of a student worker handbook. With each employer, this started to look a little bit different, but it was just so they had mapped out expectations of the job. This also helped, parents understand what was going on. This way, the employer and the student was on the same page with, what the expectations were. They were outlined. There was a expectation to hold up to. Then, there was parent-student worksite meeting, outline work, expectation, explain apprenticeships. A big piece of this is making sure that the parent or guardian that's involved understands that this is an apprenticeship, that this is a real job, that they are hired on by this employer, and that, this is something that isn't just a co-op job. Student advocacy, learning how to explain strengths, learning style, and asking questions. We all know that it is sometimes very difficult to advocate for yourself. And so sitting down with those students and learning, what are your strengths? How do you learn best? What questions do you feel comfortable asking? Kind of helping them navigate, ways to advocate for themselves as they proceed in their job. Realistic hiring process, applications, interviews, tours, and work demonstrations. So this kind of helps the process of, as a student is coming in, we wanted this to look like, a real job, because that's exactly what it was. So they were to go through the hiring process. They were to fill out an application, have an interview with that employer, possibly tour the facility where they were going to be working. And then, also some places did some work demonstrations to kind of say, this is the type of work you're going to be doing. This really helped navigate for a lot of students, a real feel for what was going to happen on the job and if they were going to like it. We had some employers that were able to interview more than one student, so they were able to kind of go through that real process, that real world example of, who gets hired and what happens if you don't get hired and looking for that next job. We had supporting staff to develop natural supports. So this really was, everybody has, support staff on the job, but what does your natural supports look like? Is that, is that a parent, a friend? Is it somebody on the job that you've, developed a great relationship with? What does that natural support going to look like? Who's going to be able to kind of help you advocate for yourself, talk to you about, what's, going on in your life at home, what's going on in life at work, and just helping, kind of keep those situations separate, but also kind of navigate when you're on the job. Who can I go to for support? Who can I look to for questions? And then the wraparound case management services to participants and staff. Like Darlene said, they're getting a wraparound support. So in these situations, WIO is providing them a case manager. They're attached to the school and they're part of that, work program. You have the employer, and the employer piece is tied to all of us. So if there's an issue or if there's great progress, they get to reach out and tell us exactly what's going on. And we can kind of talk through all those situations. So it's nice because they're getting the supports from everybody. So what we kind of learned too is that sometimes it's nice when, we might hear something that the, school staff didn't hear or vice versa. And so, staying in that, constant communication is really good, which then leads back to those, round table meetings. We're able to sit down and bring it all to the table and, discuss what's working. So the second apprenticeship, this, with everything that was, working toward those improvements, the second one had 4 apprentices. It started in August of 2022. 2 went with Parks and Rec, 1 did housekeeping, and 1 did the event associate, so the event setup. Again, this was with the Collinsville STEP program. And then for this one, all 4 participants did complete their DOL certification, and that was in August 2023, 1 calendar year later. All apprentices were offered a job after graduation, which was also fantastic. And then 2 apprentices were also enrolled in college and working part-time. So it just really, showed that as we kind of sat and listened and kind of helped navigate who would be best for some of these roles and, help them make those connections, that, this was much more a success. All right. So then expansion. Well, as we build this apprenticeship and we build these employer relationships, obviously there's some expansion. So we've had apprenticeship, success with Westar Aviation, ACT, the bus system, Weber Chevrolet, Icon Mechanical, Scroggins Law Office, and Supplied Energy. And this is kind of an example of what those different apprentice occupations look like. So, you've got housekeeping, the event setup and the landscaping. And then this then kind of rolled into a warehouse associate, the bus cleaner position, safety department administrative assistant, and legal receptionist. So these were all apprenticeable occupations, 1 calendar year in length, and yeah.
So how did we get to those additional apprenticeships with employers? It's all about how we communicate with the employers. We have an open dialogue. A lot of times we get referrals. So one employer we're working with may refer us to another employer, or we might be at a meeting and talk to someone and give them a card, and then they follow up, or the DCEO might give us a referral. So we use open dialogue. When we go in to meet with a business for the first time, tell us about your business. Tell us what you do. How long have you been in business? We just met with some business this past week who's providing an expansion. So what does that look like? How has your growth been? Tell us, what are the pain points? Where do you feel you need the most help? What do you feel that you do the best? What's your culture like? Do you have high turnover? How can we help you? We're here for what you need.
Don't rush communication. Everyone has their own style. So there are 4 interpersonal styles: driver, which is action-oriented, fast-paced, and decisive, goal-focused; expressive, which is high energy, enthusiastic, and people-oriented; amiable, which is warm, friendly, and relationship-focused; and analytical, which is logical, data-driven, cautious, and value facts. So style does matter. You have to know your style, understand how to identify who you are talking to, what's their style, and think about adjusting how you communicate to aid in a conveying message. I think something we've definitely learned along the way as we make those employer contacts is learning to adjust to their language. Our language obviously comes from the social services world and the government world, and that is very different than the business world of language.
Okay, so how do you approach the new employer? One of the things that we do when we meet with a new employer is, of course, we always express our gratitude for the time to meet. We always offer them a flexibility in the meeting style. Do they prefer to meet in person or virtual? A self-introduction is always a great thing, because you can schedule a meeting and it can be on your calendar, but you walk from your office to a conference room, or you click onto that Zoom, and it's really easy to forget who you're talking to, who you're going to be meeting with. So sometimes just that quick self-introduction kind of takes away that uneasiness of, oh man, I cannot remember their name, because I do it all the time. We always like to ask them about their business. So, tell me about your business. What is the most important project or initiative you're working on? Where do you feel you need the most help? Because every business is different. Some, it might be that they have a need for employees. Some, it is a fast-paced environment and they need to get product out. They have the employees, but they need to be quicker or faster about their assembly. So it's always a good idea to find out what they feel they need the most help with. There's always more questions. So, when you're thinking especially about someone that you have in mind to possibly work with that business, it's like, well, what you want to know, what type of person tends to be successful here? What's the culture like? Some businesses, culture is very key, and a lot of what they do is around their culture. They can train individuals to do the work. They just need somebody that culturally can fit in, come to work, be on time. Are they anticipating more growth or expansion? Because maybe you have several people in mind to potentially work with them. And so you're thinking, well, if I can get, this person in the door, maybe I can get 2 or 3 more into the door. And where do you see room for improvement? What do they think they could do better, or what would make it better for them?
Okay, so then next steps, read the room. This is huge, and you know, if you've been in a room and you know someone's not engaged, you feel that. So, you know, is the employer engaged? Are they checked out? Have they already made a decision about, you know, you're halfway through your discussion and you know they're checked out. If they are engaged and interested to take the time to provide a full explanation of how you can help, you know, that's great. You're plugged in, you're able to sit down, have that conversation, discuss the different options with them, provide an overview of the individual you are working for or the program, how it can be of benefit to the employer. Again, remember it is for the employer, it's about them and how you're helping them. So, you know, I know that we definitely, as we've done some different employer contacts, yes, you sometimes learn that maybe, you know, you offer them all these different programs and you can kind of tell where their engagement goes. You know, you may offer 10 things to them and they're set focused on one thing. And sometimes that's where you start the process.
And with that, I'll also say that I've been in situations before where we were talking about the apprenticeship, and you know, just by some of the questions we were asked, we could tell that this employer would not be our choice employer for what we were wanting to do. So we answered their questions and thanked them, and just kind of put them in the back of our minds as this is not a circle around to employer. Some employers might be a little hesitant and they want to think about it, or they might need more time. And those are always the ones you give them a little bit more time and then circle back around. And if they were interested, but they didn't know how it was going to work, usually those are the ones who will come back around and say, hey, tell me some more. Let's talk about this. And that's where, you know, job carving is just so important. You know, what I found is employers are very concrete about their positions. They know what their positions are and what they have, and that's how they see the work running. But when you sit down with them and say, you know, where are your pain points? What do you think causes, you know, like you to be less efficient? Or where do you feel like you're taking staff who maybe have a higher skill level and you're having them answer the phone? Or for us, it worked out to our advantage with job carving for the safety administrative apprenticeship. So in the safety department, they do a lot of training. And so the trainer was taking their time to get the meetings set up and get them ready, doing all the copying and a lot of the paperwork and getting the files ready, where we were able to provide them an admin for the apprenticeship. And now the person who's doing the training can focus more on the content of the training than getting it ready and making sure everything is running smoothly and after the training. And then our warehouse parts runner position was the same way. They had, you know, staff who were stopping their job to run parts from a facility across the campus. They had multiple buildings on their campus. So their mechanics were stopping from what they were doing, running parts over to the other building on campus because they were needed. So with the warehouse parts runner position, we simply put a person in who had other duties to do, but then at assigned times, they went between buildings on the campus and made sure that parts were where they needed to be and things were distributed. So I think job carving is really underutilized. You know, I think it's hard sometimes to look at our inefficiencies or our efficiencies and see where could we modify something for someone else to step in who has maybe that strength. So it's always a nice idea if you are working with people or you have individuals already in mind for a position, understanding what their strengths are as you're talking to those employers, because then that gives you an idea of where you might be able to carve out and possibly help them fit in.
Job matching is essential. As you learn about the job, if it's not ideal for the person, do not move forward. I think this goes back to a lot of what we've kind of already said. If, you know, both parties have to be bought in, both the employee and the employer. There's somebody on the job that's going to be mentoring that person. So, you know, it's best to make a match. You know, you want your person that's going into the job to want to go to work, to want to learn, to want to be better. And if they're not bought in, it's not going to work. They're not going to stay. It's better to be honest with the employer. Let them know this is not the best candidate. We've definitely done this. We've had some positions come up, like our law firm example, where the person, you know, comes in and, you know, we're like, why do you want to do this job? And they have no interest. Their interest maybe is in the medical field or something completely different. That's not going to work. You know, you're not going to stay in a job if it has nothing to do with what your future is, especially when you're working with young adults who are kind of looking at those next steps. So we're typically honest with the employer and we just say, hey, look, right now we don't have the best person for this role for you, but as we move forward and find more students or find more individuals, we will be in contact. But we don't want to make a bad match because that is not how you build trust. And building trust is really essential with all these things. With employers, you know, when you're a program like WIOA and you're offering so many different services, you know, sometimes an employer is bought in on such a surface level in the beginning that it might be that our office is just putting out a job posting. But as, you know, they see that, you know, as they kind of learn about us and what we do, and as that trust grows, then they're looking at us for, okay, maybe we do want some on the job training, or maybe we do want to try this apprenticeship. And we want to make sure that, you know, we're, you know, putting in that best candidate that we are hopeful is the best match for them, and helps build that trust going forward.
Another great example of that is we worked really hard establishing a warehousing like paid work experience opportunity. We had a local school who had 3 or 4 students. Really all they wanted to do is warehousing. And where we're located, we are 30 miles east of St. Louis. And so we are kind of a warehousing mecca. We have Amazon and, you know, Geodis and a variety of others. And so we went and really worked with some local smaller employers who had their own warehouse who could very much use the help. They were on board, bought in, and then every one of our students decided as we were getting ready to roll them to the door that that is not what they wanted to do. So we went to the employers that we had bought in and said, unfortunately, we're really sorry, but the youth have changed their minds. They're not interested in this any longer. You know, we were so sorry that we took their time. And, you know, the response we got from all of them was, hey, that's not a problem. When you get the right student, let us know. We always have a need. We would work it out with you at any time. So it was nice to know we left that door open. We didn't burn any bridges because we didn't put a student in who wasn't invested. You know, and that goes back with our building those relationships. You know, trust, honest communication, listening to their needs, you know, paying attention to their body language in those meetings as well. You said, like we said before, you got to know when to kind of walk away, circle back. We've had instances where, you know, the top of the organization was completely bought into the project. They wanted it, they felt it made good sense, and the frontline staff were not bought into the project. And we were successful in completing, but we weren't successful in the capacity that I don't think anyone really got value added from the project. So, you know, it's knowing when to maybe stop if it's not working out and it's not being a good fit for everyone involved. Sometimes you have to have those really hard conversations and say, you know, do you feel like this is working? Are you enjoying it? Because, you know, people will buy in and say, well, I have to finish. And it's like, well, if you're not happy, you don't. We can find something else. So it's all about being honest with the individual. And one of the things that one of our staff told me the other day, and it just kind of stuck, it said, I always like to tell the employer what I like about the job seeker. Because then when I bring them in, I'm hoping that they see what I like about that person, and that helps them want to bring that person on board. And I thought, you know, that's a very neat quality to bring to it. You know, you're now telling them that personal side of it, like, oh, I really like, you know, Kayla, because she always has a smile every time we meet, and she's always really friendly. I mean, that's just that extra added trust and communication piece that I think really helps somebody buy in. It makes the individual, human.
So that kind of goes with listening to your job seeker. As that person on the job, ask questions, be open-ended. Getting to know the job seeker. We always tell our participants that we're going to be best friends, especially if that is the person that's on your caseload. At a minimum, just regardless of the program, if it's OJT, you're following them for 6 months and then a year of follow-up. If it's an apprenticeship, you're following them for a year and then another year of follow-up. So, you really get to know that person. You're talking to them on a monthly basis at a minimum, and you're talking to the employer as well. Apparently I'm not moving enough in my office. So then, you're looking at, you're figuring out like, what are the dislikes? What are the likes? What are the hobbies? How do they communicate best? So you go back to looking at like their communication style and what's working for them. Ask, how do you learn best? What is your learning style? The more you know, the better you can help that person. And we've definitely had, even just in like our OJT realm of things where, we've had folks that, they decide they don't like the job. And so sometimes those things don't work out. And then when they don't work out, it's a matter of, okay, well, let's find something that will fit better for you. Okay, so styles of learning. You guys, most of you on this call, they said are in the education realm. So there is visual learners, auditory learners, reading and writing, and I always butcher this word, kinesthetic.
Learn by doing.
Learn by doing. Questions to ask based on your learning style. So visual learners, can you demonstrate that for me? Auditory learners, can you tell me, how to do that? When you're looking at reading learners, is there a manual or a checklist that I can follow? And then the hands-on learners, can I try it myself? So definitely this goes into play, especially when we're working with our students. We've had a situation where, the person was to collect 52 trash cans. And we had asked several times, can this person get a checklist? Can we make them a to-do list? Some employers are like really great about like, I've mapped them out a to-do list for every day. This is what they do. They can come in, they can check it off. For this individual, he was in a giant warehouse. And so 52 trash cans to try to find and know which ones you've taken out and which ones you haven't is really difficult. So, we went through and we said, can we number the trash cans? And then he can go through and check them off as he does his job. So, being able to figure out like how he learns best, what's going to help him like get through that situation really kind of helped.
Okay. So, one of the most important things we found out as we were rolling through these models was helping our students understand their style and how they learned best. So working with your job seekers so that they can understand how they learn best. Personally, I like a demonstration and I like to then follow up and do the thing. So, if I'm learning a new piece of equipment, I want to watch you do it and then I want to do it myself so that I've modeled what I've learned. So, practice asking questions based on learning styles. Some of those questions we just ran through. Sometimes our students aren't always really good at asking questions. So it's teaching them how to ask the questions that will help them with their learning style. And I know that's hard, and it's hard for people to ask questions. We've also worked with our students with the school and through our case management about having the students explain to the employer how they prefer to learn. And this really, we found out with several of our employers really helped because then they knew how to target training that student. And it's okay, people can use more than one style. Just blend the style and use your questions and ask those questions or just tell them how you prefer to learn. And with that, it's So, using your best approach for learning styles. We've had individuals where they worked best with seeing pictures. They had a checklist and it had pictures on the checklist instead of words, or a map of what they were supposed to be doing or where they were supposed to be going. If you have somebody who's audio, they could receive those instructions, verbally. Or if they have to do some kind of training, it could be that, there's a verbal component to that, especially if there's reading to it. Checklists and handouts. We know how those work for our reading learners. Modeling and demonstration, again, are best for the hands-on learners.
So advocate for your strengths and weaknesses. Helping someone understand their strengths and weaknesses is hard and helpful. If a job seeker can tell the employer how they learn, what they are good at, and what they are not so good at, it will strengthen their ability to advocate for themselves and build relationships. As part of the application process, this is something we built in. It was a great way to learn about that person and learn their strengths and weaknesses and help them to take that to the employer. Because insight is everything. And I think that was great for them, kind of being able to say it out loud, see it for themselves, and then also taking it back to that communication style and saying, this is my strength, this is my weakness, and it helps the employer know how to move forward with that person. So listen to family, teachers, supports. Ask open-ended questions. How do they believe the person communicates best? How does the job seeker learn best? We all know that, teachers are with students every single day, family as well. And so sometimes getting those outside perspectives can help a lot, especially if you're working with someone who isn't the best communicator. That really kind of helps target maybe the way they do learn, how to kind of break those barriers and kind of get them out of their shell. So listening to those, outside supports goes a very long way.
And the other thing that's slightly different for our office versus, the school system is the fact that, we're an adult, essentially, we're a service provider. Primarily, we work with adults. We do work with youth, but our services are not within the school system. So, this is kind of that next step from school into adulthood. So we're building that bridge of adult services, even though we may be serving them as a youth. What we did find out was, one job plus one job seeker does not equal success. This goes back to our job matching. We had the person who was interested in nursing who, due to family persuasion, school persuasion, they thought the legal receptionist position would be a really good fit for them. Because it would teach them how to do paperwork or work, in an office. And when your heart isn't in something, going from wanting to be medical to law, it really was not a good meshing. So it did not work out. One of our groundskeepers really wanted to be a nail tech and really liked their acrylic nails and all of the things that go with that. So getting dirty, working in the dirt, operating equipment, wearing gloves really was not a good fit for them either, because we didn't job match. We just said job for you and a job for you. We did have somebody who really wanted to be a video game designer, but again, thought they would, family thought it would be a really good opportunity to do the bus sanitizer apprenticeship, because it is a really good job once, they get out of school and they continue. I mean, it is a fantastic job. And so I understand the family were thinking very realistically, but for this young man, he was not committed to being there, did a lot of things to not be there. So it just wasn't a good fit for him either. So, you got to realize sometimes it's just not the best match.
Yeah, he was a great example of kind of pushing the boundaries to not have to go to work anymore. It was more the push from his family to go to work, and it just wasn't a good match for him. So what we learned the hard way, well, 6 jobs and 6 kids does not lead to success. A job for a job's sake will not lead to success. Job matching is key. Placement in the industry, maybe not specifically, can lead to increased success. So I do have on the next slide a couple of examples. Industry placement that worked. So we have also partnered on some of our apprenticeship models with Holly's House of Hope. They do adults with disabilities. And so the person that runs that program, is kind of looking at like, what are the dream jobs? Where can I get this person working? Something that they're going to like to do. This is part-time employment for them. He had somebody say, I want to be a firefighter or a police officer. And he said, well, I can't do that, but what I could possibly do is get you into the building. And through several conversations, the owner of Holly's House of Hope was able to get in there, really talk up the person, talk up those strengths, and say all the good things and how committed he would be to the job and why he loves it and wants to work here. And they created a detailer position for him. So he got to come in and clean all the police cars, clean the fire trucks. He gets to help load up equipment and do different things of that nature. He's still there to this day, and he's been there for a few years now, and they love him, and he does a great job there. The other example, same with Holly's House of Hope, was a daycare teacher. And so we found a preschool that was willing to start an apprenticeship with this person where they could come in and be a classroom assistant. What was interesting about this one is that the apprenticeship model did not work. We learned that the competencies for this person, it was not a great match. It was overwhelming for them. They knew that, the school knew that, but they liked this person so much, and she loved her job and the kids loved her, that they actually just created a part-time position for her where she could come in and do the task that she was good at. And I mean, they really saw the value in keeping her. So they created a position for her that was kind of like outside of those competencies, but still fit what she was looking for.
So really, I know we're running close on time here. The key takeaways are listening is essential. You have to listen to your businesses, to your job seekers, to families. Communication is key. Pay attention to your verbal and nonverbal. Work is learned. Not everyone has the same learned experiences. And sometimes we have to remind employers that, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we've had kids who've come in on the job and not know how to turn on a vacuum cleaner. And it's not because they don't do chores at home, but maybe they don't have a vacuum at home. They might have a robot, or, they've not had the opportunity to work certain equipment or do certain things because maybe they just never have. So it's sometimes backing up the employer and saying, hey, they just have never experienced that. Let's take the time to show them. And, sometimes it's that light bulb moment where we just assume people know our fund of knowledge. And then we have to remind people that not everyone has the same fund of knowledge. All right, so we're going to open it up for questions. So please feel free to ask us questions, and Kayla can put up our contact information. No?
If you'd like to ask a question like audibly, I can give you access to ask audibly. Just raise your hand or put something in chat too. But while we wait, I had a few questions. So early on, I can't remember if Kayla or Darlene, one of you mentioned the de-escalation training.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, here we go. Someone else asked a question. Let's ask theirs. I'm not as important. Any job fields that are more difficult to get into, make connections with from your experience?
Yes, I would say in instances where there's union involvement, and that just tends to span across maybe multiple industries. There are so many different rules that are in place around unions and having someone part-time and things of that nature. So that's definitely been one of our harder, and not being able to break out jobs to help with someone's strengths. So union positions can be the hardest.
And that
Hmm.
could even be union positions in a grocery store.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So the de-escalation training, we
Mhm.
actually developed that ourselves from our office. Previously, when I worked with a nonprofit, we did CPI training, and I remembered there were a lot of techniques within that training that were pretty helpful. So we worked with Blue Tower Training, and they helped us develop a job coaching for success de-escalation. And it's primarily about communication. Um, and what we found was some of the employers, we provided it to staff, frontline staff who were working with, the public, felt like it was advantageous because it kind of
Hmm.
put a new spin on thinking about how to work with someone if they were unhappy or dissatisfied.
Hmm. Excellent. Um, and then you also mentioned, what is the student worker handbook? Is that like a specific handbook, like a singular document, or like is that contextualized to different spaces?
So it can be different based on the employer, but
Mm.
it's basically an employee handbook. And sometimes our students may not need an entire employee handbook if the employer has it. They just need certain things that are relevant to them on their job. So it might be breaking it down into simpler language,
Mm.
different font, making it more understandable. But the nice thing about sharing that handbook with parents is that at that point in time, we are really putting that point across that this is Kayla's job. And if she's going to, you can't call off for Kayla. Kayla has to call off when she's sick, or
Mhm.
Kayla is responsible to wear her own uniform. So really at that point, we're starting to demonstrate that this is the next step in adulting, and
Mm.
that we have to be responsible. And we know everyone gets help, but we're really trying to move that away a little bit more from the parents with the individual having their own responsibility,
Mhm.
because
Excellent.
that's hard.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions from our attendees? Excellent. Thank you so much, Darlene and Kayla, for sharing from your experience. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from people who've done it and who've, transparently seen failure in it and success. That is super helpful. So I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing, even when it maybe didn't work out as you had intended. So
Sure.
um,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
thank you for inviting us. And if anyone would like to reach out, having any questions about apprenticeships or what we learned, how we stumbled and fell a couple times and picked ourselves back up, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to share our knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, tomorrow the webinar will be posted on our ATTA website within the next few days, along with the slides, and you'll be getting a survey probably within 24 hours or so. So thank you everyone for attending. Um, if you do want a certificate of completion, I can do that. Please just email me. I'll drop my email in the chat just so you don't have to go back and look through the recording. So um, feel free to email me saying, hey, I was at the ATTA webinar and I'd like a certificate of completion. That's what I can provide. So awesome. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.